Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is something pretty special. If you're looking for a new high-end, thin and light gaming laptop, well this is probably what you've been waiting for. It's the MSI GS66 Stealth, and this guy is the world's first gaming laptop to come with both Intel's latest 10th generation Comet Lake processors and Nvidia's brand new RTX Super series of graphics cards. I've got the 8-core i9 chip, along with the RTX 2080 Super Max Q. Oh, and also a 300Hz refresh rate screen and a massive 99.9 watt-hour battery. This thing is an absolute beast in terms of performance, and as you can see, it's also pretty portable. And it's not very often you get a new generation of processors and a new series of graphics cards at the same time, and combined with a massive battery. As I say, this is the biggest you can get while still being able to take this on the plane, and all that with a 300Hz refresh rate screen. It is so buttery smooth, and unfortunately, it's just not something I can show you through this video. I'm recording my A-roll here at 30 FPS, most of my B-roll because I'm showing games at 60, but nowhere near close to 300. You really have to either come to my house or go to a store, neither of which I really recommend right now, to experience that for yourself. And they've managed to cram it all in this super thin and light chassis. We're looking at 2.1 kilograms, and it's just a smidge under 20 centimeters thick. It's incredible. Now, obviously, with these thin and light laptops, we're getting the Max Q variants of the graphics cards. But in this form factor, right now, this is one of the most powerful gaming laptops you can buy.
Time to earn your freedom, soldier.
Now, before we get to the gaming and the benchmarks and all that good stuff, first thing you'll notice when you open it is that it supports Windows Hello, so I can actually unlock this with my face. The next thing you'll notice, as I try to avoid the light reflecting off it, you can tell this is a matte screen, but it's not particularly bright. I measured a peak brightness of around 180, 190 nits, which is actually quite dim for a laptop, and considering the price of this thing, which I'll come to in just a second, that's actually one of my biggest disappointments of this. It's fine if you're doing some late night gaming sessions, but if you're trying to make a video about this in the middle of the day in a very bright living room and kitchen, then maybe it's not the best option, although I'm not sure how many people would do that. Next up, the design. And MSI have said they've gone with a core black design ethos for this. So I actually have last year's MSI GS75 laptop here. This is the 17-inch version, which came with a RTX 2080. So we will do some comparison benchmarks here between the Super and the regular 2080 Max Q cards. I quite like this because you've got this gold coppery trim around the trackpad, on the hinges, and around the edge, and also on the MSI logo. Gone are all of those accents. So everywhere you look, from the hinge to the logo, it's completely black. The only thing that kind of makes it a bit more gamery or even a bit more interesting to look at is the full RGB keyboard. And everything can be controlled, including programming macros for any of the keys in the SteelSeries app, which is pre-installed, where you can also adjust all the RGB lighting. Alongside this, we also have the Dragon Center for changing speed profiles, turning on game mode, and all the other usual command center bits and pieces. MSI also say that they've made the hinge a bit more stable, which I think they have. If I also bring up last year's one again, this isn't the direct replacement, this is the 17-inch one, so we'll probably get a GS76 as well. Yeah, it's a little better maybe, but not night and day. Although, for some reason, I'm not sure quite why you'd want to do this, but you can actually push it all the way down. The twin speakers have also been moved up top. We've got little slits down here on the left and right side, and they do sound good. They're very, very loud, but I still think they're a little bit tinny. Obviously, a pair of headphones is going to be what you want. We've also got this new design of the fan exhaust on the side. They do look a little bit like USB ports. Don't put a USB drive in there. Slightly annoyingly, I found that when my mouse is here, the fan is blowing right onto my thumb. It was a bit irritating. I had to sort of have my mouse unnaturally far away from the laptop in order for my hand not to start warming up. Personally, I quite like it when they put the ports on the back, so all the cables are sort of hidden behind the screen, but with this MSI, they're all pretty much bang in the center of the sides. But we do get a good selection, including 3 USB-A's, 2 USB-C's, one of which is Thunderbolt 3 and can also charge this. It will probably still trickle down if you're gaming, but you can plug in a USB-C charger and that'll top you up or at least keep you stable. What you've probably noticed as I've been talking though is that this thing is a fingerprint magnet. It does get a bit greasy and messy. I'm a pretty clean person. I wash my hands at least twice a week, but particularly on the lid and also around the palm rest, gets a bit grubby, so keep a microfiber cloth to hand. The keyboard and the trackpad on this are also one of my favorites on a gaming laptop. It's a precision trackpad, extra wide, so you got loads of space there, and the keys themselves have 1.5 mil of travel, but it's lovely to type on. I've actually written all my notes for this video on this laptop, and it's been great. So we've got through the boring stuff. Let's get to some games and also some benchmarks, because I want to see how fast this is. And to do that, I'm actually going to bring in my iPad Pro with the fancy Magic keyboard, which is for another video, but I've got some notes on here because I ran a whole bunch of benchmarks and game tests on this, and the results are actually really, really interesting. Now, I also had, as I say, the previous GS75, I'm gonna get that right, which has the RTX 2080 Max-Q, not the Super which we get in here. However, this does have a 2-generation-old processor, the i7-8750H, whereas now we're on 10th gen. So I will give you the full comparison, but mainly we're looking at the GPU performance between this and this. And I put this through its paces in Geekbench 5, 3D Mark Time Spy, Uni-Engine Superposition Test, and also Passmark's 3D Test. And as you can see, it's a pretty small 4.2% boost on average with the new Supercard. And while these are only synthetic benchmarks, they are all GPU tests and a reasonably good indicator of the performance difference. For fairness, I'm not including the GS75 in my gaming benchmarks. As I say, there's too many variables. But while there may not appear to be a huge upgrade with the Supercards, let's see what average frame rates we can get from the GS66. Every single game is in triple digits, and CSGO, League, and Rainbow Six Siege all break that 200 FPS mark. Triple digits across the board, maxed out games at 1080p, but it does raise the question of that 300 Hz refresh rate. Now, of course, you can drop the settings to get better performance, which a lot of gamers do, particularly in esports and competitive multiplayer, because that edge of frame rate is obviously more important than the fancy reflections or the dynamic shadows. So yeah, if you're playing a MOBA or an older, less intensive game and you drop some of the settings, you probably will be able to hit 300 with this. The other question of can you even see the difference between 240 and 300 Hz? Well, as I say, I was even struggling to get to 300 to actually perceive it myself, but looking on the desktop, compared to the 144 Hz screen that I have on this guy, yes, I can see a difference. However, when I used it next to my 240Hz LG gaming monitor that I have, again, it's not something I can show you easily in this video. I don't think I could tell, but I'm also 29 years old and I'm not a pro gamer, so maybe my eyesight and my reflexes aren't quite up to yours. Maybe it'll be worth it for you. For me, 240Hz is absolutely fine, and it's still a noticeable increase over 144. But what about throttling? Well, first things first, and while my test did show a peak of 5.3 GHz on the i9 as advertised, it quickly drops to around 3.5 GHz under load. I measured a peak CPU temp of 98 degrees Celsius before averaging around 95 as I'm running benchmarks. The GPU though never went over 72 Celsius. Running Cinebench R 25 times in a row, the score dropped from around 3600 to 3100. That's a 14.5% drop, which is quite significant. The same thing running Uni-Engine Superposition to test the graphics, and I saw only a 2.4% drop. Now as for cooling, we have 3 fans and 7 heat pipes, which MSI say gives us 10% more airflow than the previous model. It does still get quite warm though. I recorded about 42 degrees around the WASD keys, about 32 on the touchpad, and a peak of about 45, 46 from the vents. So it's not super uncomfortably hot, but as I say, the vents on the side blowing out that hot air did make my hand on my mouse get quite warm. They can get pretty loud as well. This is the loudest they'll get. It's not usually that much. I've just put it in sort of overdrive fan mode, but I'd say it's about 80% of that when you're playing games. So you're gonna probably wanna plug in a pair of headphones. Since I already have the bottom off, you can see we've got a PCIe M2 SSD here. You can actually upgrade that yourself. There's also a second PCIe M2 slot if you wanna have 2 different drives in here. This particular model has 16 gigs of RAM, although you can spec it, I believe in the US, up to 32 gigs, or you can upgrade it yourself up to a maximum of 64 gigabytes of RAM. As for battery, I got a good 4 hours of light use from this thing, which given the specs inside is actually pretty impressive, but you'll be wanting to play this with it plugged in anyway, obviously to get that performance from the GPU. Now prices start at £1,700 and that'll get you an RTX 2060, and according to this, that's a full fat one. It's not actually saying Max-Q, so that's pretty interesting, but not a super version of the card. If you do want a super graphics card, then you're gonna have to pay at least £2,300, which will get you an RTX 2070 Super Max Q. But if you want a top spec model, which I have here with the 2080 Super Max Q, it's gonna cost you £3,000, and that's the same in dollars as well. I think if you do have quite deep pockets and you fancy buying one of these, I would pay $2,300 to get the 2070 Super Max Q, 300Hz and i7. That's probably gonna be the best one to go for. This really is a pretty special laptop. As I say, world's first to come with the 10th gen and the super cards, along with 300Hz and that crazy good battery life. But nothing is perfect. The webcam quality is a little bit iffy. As I say, it's a little bit frustrating having that warm air blowing on my hand when I'm using a mouse. The speakers, while loud, are lacking in bass, a little bit tinny. And while it is a subjective thing, I did quite like the gold accent on the previous gen laptops. It looks a bit bland, a bit gigabyte. Hi guys, this is Tom from the future, just jumping in for a second because while these laptops with the new super cards and also the 10th gen Intel processors are coming in at a slight price premium, they are very expensive. And I don't know if they do represent necessarily good value for money. Yes, it's faster, we do see a performance boost, but whether it's worth that premium, obviously it's up to you and your individual situation, whether you're happy to spend that kind of money. But the good thing about this, you know, cutting edge tech is always going to come at a premium, but there is always a trickle down. And we're now seeing full fat RTX 2060 gaming laptops. I reviewed another MSI one last week that cost just under £1,000. And that also comes with a high refresh rate, you know, i7 processors. And crucially, it also means that last year's model may actually be cheaper now, so you might be able to get a good deal on that. But how about you? Would you consider buying something like this, or do you think it's just way too expensive and overkill? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more from me, then make sure you do hit that subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.